The Adventures of Ali Baba Bernstein by Joanna Hurwitz, illustrated by Brian Biggs. How Ali Baba got his name. David Bernstein was 8 years old, 5 months, and 17 days old when he chose his new name. There were already 4 Davids in David Bernstein's 3rd grade class. Every time his teacher, Mrs. Buchsbaum, called, "David," all 4 boys answered. David didn't like that one bit. He wished he had an exciting name like one of the explorers he learned about in social studies. Vasco da Gama. Once he found 2 unusual names on a program his parents brought home from a concert. Zubin Mehta and Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Now those were names with pizzazz. David Bernstein might have gone along forever being just another David, if it had not been for the book report that his teacher assigned. "I will give extra credit for fat books," Mrs. Buchsbaum called the class. She didn't realize that all of her students would try to outdo one another. That afternoon, when the 3rd grade went to the school library, everyone tried to find the fattest book. Melanie found a book with 80 pages. Sam found a book with 97 pages. Jeffrey found a book with 119 pages. David K. and David S. each took a copy of the same book. It had 147 pages. None of the books were long enough for David Bernstein. He looked at a few that had over 100 pages. He found one that had 214 pages. But he wanted a book that had more pages than the total of all the pages in all the books his classmates were reading. He wanted to be the best student in the class, even in the entire school. That afternoon, he asked his mother what the fattest book was. Mrs. Bernstein thought for a minute. "I guess that would have to be the Manhattan telephone book," she said. David Bernstein rushed to get the phone book. He lifted it up and opened to the last page. When he saw that it had over 1,578 pages, he was delighted. He knew that no student in the history of PS 35 had ever read such a fat book. Just think how much extra credit he would get. David took the book and began to read name after name after name. After turning through the A pages, he skipped to the name Bernstein. He found the listing for his father, Robert Bernstein. There were 15 of them. Then he counted the number of David Bernsteins in the telephone book. There were 17. There was also a woman named Davida and a man named Davis, but he didn't count them. Right at that moment, David decided 2 things. He would change his name, and he would find another book to read. The next day, David went back to the school library. He asked the librarian to help him pick out a very fat book. "But it must be very exciting, too," he told her. "I know just the thing for you," said the librarian. She handed David a thick book with a bright red cover. It was The Arabian Nights. It had only 337 pages, but it looked a lot more interesting than the phone book. David checked the book out of the library and spent the entire evening reading it. Then, when he showed the book to his teacher the next day, she was very pleased. "That is a good book," she said. "David, you have made a fine choice." It was at that moment that David Bernstein announced his new name. He had found it in the library book. "From now on," David said, "I want to be called Ali Baba Bernstein." Mrs. Buchsbaum was surprised. David's parents were even more surprised. "David is a beautiful name," said his mother. "It was my grandfather's name." You can't just go around changing your name when you feel like it, his father said. How will I ever know who I'm talking to? You'll still know it's me, Ali Baba told his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Bernstein finally agreed, although both of them frequently forgot and called their son David. So now, in Mrs. Buxbaum's class, there were 3 Davids and 1 Ali Baba. Ali Baba Bernstein was very happy. He was sure that a boy with an exciting name would have truly exciting adventures. Only time would tell. The Gathering of David Bernsteins. When Ali Baba Bernstein was 8 years, 11 months, and 4 days old, his mother asked him how he wanted to celebrate his 9th birthday. He could take his friends to the bowling alley or to a movie, or he could have a roller skating party. None of these choices seemed very exciting to Ali Baba. 2 boys in his class had already given bowling parties, another had invited all the boys in the class to a movie, and a 3rd classmate was giving a roller skating party next week. Ali Baba wanted to do something different. Do you remember when I counted all the David Bernsteins in the telephone book? Mrs. Bernstein nodded. I'd like to meet them all, said David. I want to invite them here for my birthday. But you don't know them, his mother said, and they're not your age. I want to see what they're all like, said Ali Baba. If I can't invite them, then I don't want to have a party at all. A week later, when Ali Baba was 8 years, 11 months, and 12 days old, his mother asked about his birthday again. I told you what I decided, said Ali Baba. That night, Ali Baba's parents talked about the David Bernstein party. Mr. Bernstein liked his son's idea. He thought the other David Bernsteins might be curious to meet one another. So, it was agreed that Ali Baba would have the party he wanted. The very next morning, which was Saturday, Ali Baba and his father went to his father's office. Ali Baba had written an invitation to the David Bernstein party. Mr. Bernstein had explained that RSVP was French abbreviation that meant please tell me if you're going to come. He also said that his son should give his age in the letter. Honesty is the best policy, Ali Baba, his father advised. Ali Baba was going to use the word processor in his father's office to print the letter. It took him a long time to type his letter on the machine. His father tried to help him, but he did not type very well either. When the letter was finally completed and the print button pushed, the machine produced 17 perfect copies, 1 for each David Bernstein. That evening, Ali Baba addressed the 17 envelopes so that the invitations could be mailed on Monday morning. His father supplied the stamps. By the end of the week, 2 David Bernsteins had already called to accept. By the time Ali Baba Bernstein was 8 years, 11 months, and 29 days old, 7 David Bernsteins had accepted his invitation. 4 David Bernsteins called to say they couldn't come. 6 David Bernsteins did not answer at all. Dear David Bernstein, I found your name in the Manhattan telephone book. My name is David Bernstein, too. I want to meet all the David Bernsteins in New York. I am having a party on Friday, May 12th at 7 p.m., and I hope you can come. My mother is cooking supper. She is a very good cook. Yours truly, David Bernstein, also known as Ali Baba Bernstein. P.S. May 12th is my 9th birthday, but you don't need to bring a present. RSVP 211-3579. Ali Baba and his mother chose the menu for his birthday dinner. There would be a pot roast, corn, Ali Baba's favorite vegetable, rolls, applesauce, and salad. They were also having kasha varnishkas, a combination of buckwheat groats and noodles, which one of the guests had requested. The evening of the party finally arrived. Ali Baba had decided to wear a pair of slacks, a sport jacket, and real dress shoes. It was not at all the way he would have dressed for the bowling party. Ali Baba was surprised when the first guest arrived in a jogging suit and running shoes. "How do you do?" he said, when Ali Baba answered the door. "I'm David Bernstein." "Of course," said the birthday boy. "Call me Ali Baba." Soon the living room was filled with David Bernsteins. They ranged in age from exactly 9 years and 3 hours old to 76 years old. He was the David Bernstein who had asked for the kasha varnishkas. There was a television director, a delicatessen owner, a mailman, an animal groomer, a dentist, a high school teacher, and a writer. They all lived in Manhattan now, but they had been born in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Michigan, Poland, Germany, and South Africa. None of them had ever met any of the others before. All of the guests enjoyed the dinner. "David, will you please pass those delicious rolls?" asked the mailman. "Certainly, David," said the animal groomer to his left. "David, would you please pass the pitcher of apple cider this way?" asked the dentist. "Here it is, David," said the television director. "I have trouble remembering names," the 76-year-old David Bernstein told Ali Baba. "At this party, I can't possibly forget." He smiled at Ali Baba. "What did you say your nickname was?" "Ali Baba is not a nickname. I've chosen it to be my real name. There are too many David Bernsteins." There were even more in the telephone book who didn't come tonight. "I was the only David Bernstein to finish the New York City Marathon," said David Bernstein, the dentist. He was the only one wearing running shoes. "The poodles I clip don't care what my name is," said David Bernstein, the animal groomer. "It's not what you're called, but what you do that matters," said the 76-year-old David Bernstein. All of them agreed to that. "I once read that in some places children are given temporary names. They're called milk names. They can then choose whatever names they want when they get older," said David Bernstein, the high school teacher. "I'd still choose David Bernstein," said David Bernstein, the delicatessen owner. "Just because we all have the same name doesn't make us the same." "You're right," agreed David Bernstein, the mailman. "Hear, hear," called out David Bernstein, the television director. He raised his glass of apple cider, a toast to the youngest David Bernstein in the room. Everyone turned to Ali Baba. He was about to say that he didn't want to be called David, but somehow he didn't mind his name so much now that he had met all these other David Bernsteins. They were all different. There would never be another David Bernstein like himself. One of these days he might go back to calling himself David again, but not just now. "Open your presents," called out David Bernstein, the writer. Even though he said that they didn't have to, several guests had brought gifts. So after singing Happy Birthday and cutting into the ice cream cake that was shaped like the Manhattan phone book, Ali Baba began to open the packages. There was a pocket calculator the size of a business card, just like the one his father had. There was a jigsaw puzzle that looked like a subway map of Manhattan, a model airplane kit, and a few other books. One was a collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. "I used to call myself Sherlock Bernstein," the high school teacher recalled. There was an atlas, and, best of all, there was the Arabian Nights. "Now I have my own copy," said Ali Baba. This was the best birthday he ever had. Finally, it was time for the guests to leave. "I never thought I would meet all the David Bernsteins," said David Bernstein, the writer. You haven't, said Ali Baba. Besides the 17 David Bernsteins in the telephone book, there were 683 other Bernsteins listed between Aaron Bernstein and Zachary Bernstein. There must be members of their families who are named David. I bet there are thousands of David Bernsteins that I haven't met yet. You're right, said the 76-year-old David Bernstein, patting Ali Baba on the back. Maybe I could invite them all next year, said Ali Baba. He was already 9 years old and 6 hours old. You could put an advertisement in the newspaper, suggested the mailman. Ali Baba liked that idea. David Bernstein, the writer said, I just might go home and write all about this. When did you get so interested in all the David Bernsteins? It goes back a long time, said Ali Baba. It all started on the day that I was 8 years, 5 months, and 17 days old.